Hi, a big welcome to Research Life. My name is Nana Kwame Anoche. Today's edition marks the second phase of the running series on developing research ideas. And the focus for today is on trying to understand this very challenging issue that faces early career researchers from a social science perspective. Once again, we're lucky and blessed to have an established and renowned researcher in our midst, Professor Clare Williams. Professor Williams is the Dean of Research at Brunel University London. She's a professor of medical sociology, and she's a recipient of several grant awards from Wellcome Trust and the ESRC. She also serves on commission panels for the Department of Health and the Wellcome Trust. And in recognition of her research on the sociology of biomedical ethics, she was recently appointed as the UK's representative for the International STEMS Working Forum. Thank you very much, Professor Williams.
Thank you for asking me.
Thanks for accepting our invitation. Can you walk us through how you developed your first idea?
I was thinking about this. I think my first major grant was really my postdoctoral fellowship, which I got from the Wellcome Trust. And I was trying to think, how did I go about getting the idea? And really, I think all of my ideas for my most successful projects come out of previous projects that I've been working on. So I was working on a really interesting project about antenatal screening. And I just became fascinated by surgery on the fetus, which was actually quite new at that time. And for me, I think that was just something that I thought, this is a really interesting area, it's quite novel, don't think many people have worked on it before, I'm going to pursue this idea. And it was really that, I think, that was probably my main grant that got me on the ladder. But it was, I think my key message from that is that often my best ideas come out of grants that I'm already working on.
So when you found the interest, you found that you have an interest in the idea, what was the first thing you did?
Well, it would be, I would do a quick check of the literature, but I wouldn't spend a long time doing that because you can find out pretty quickly whether other people have been working on the area. So I'd do a quick check of the literature. I would really be looking at, my first things would be who would fund this? Is it likely to be funded? How big would the project have to be? Obviously at that stage I was quite a newly qualified researcher, so I was looking for postdoctoral fellowships. I looked at the ESRC. I thought, no, the Wellcome Trust would be the best place because they're really interested in social science and ethics. And then you look at the parameters of that grant, and then I build my grant and the whole project around the money that's available, what you're expected to do. So key things would be, because you're inexperienced at that stage, you need to look for a good team of people around you. That's really a crucial thing. So your co-applicants have to be, everybody has to be on your team, people that you can work with. Everybody has to have a particular role. You don't want overlaps of roles. You don't want to ask people too early because it's quite hard to unask somebody once you've asked them. You can upset people by, asking them and then saying, actually, I don't want, So you really have to be careful when you build your team. For my sort of research, because I'm very interested in medical technologies, I have to have a clinician that I can work with, that's willing to work with me, that's willing to open up what they do for scrutiny, really, which a lot of clinicians might not be too keen on that. So for me that would be a crucial thing. So I made contact with the clinician who performed fetal surgery, got his permission, his okay, and went from there. Wrote the grant, put it in. Here I am.
Good. Apart from, you mentioned looking at the literature but not spending a lot of time, and also trying to look at the parameters of the grants that you hope to apply for. Which other sources did you fall on at the time? Like, did you get advice? Did you talk to your peers?
I talked a little bit to the, I was working on a project at the time, as I say, so I talked a little bit to the PI on that, the professor, because she was very experienced. I spoke quickly, I think, to the Wellcome Trust to see whether it would be suitable, but in some ways that was pretty much it. If I get an idea, you can spend an awful lot of time touting your idea around, and sometimes it gets a bit diluted, I think, and it might move away from actually the thing that you're interested in. So I suppose I was always pretty confident that my ideas were good ones. Sounds a bit arrogant, but I think you have to be a bit like that. You have to have faith in yourself. I would have, you know, pretty quickly certainly drafted out a proposal and gone from there.
We did a survey where we talked to early career researchers, and we talked to some who were not very confident about sharing the ideas with people, not because they thought the ideas were good, but because they were a bit mindful that somebody might nick the idea. How would you advise such people?
I've always been amazed at how generous people are with their time, senior people, and I think you have to go into research with some element of trust. It might be difficult in the scientific world, for example. I'm not sure, but in social science, I think you have to go in with a degree of trust. You have to obviously pick the people that you ask, that you talk about your ideas to. They have to be people that you trust, that you think can give you good advice. But and I guess once you start talking about your idea, you can't just let it keep floating. You have to think, okay, this is my project. I'm going to write this proposal. I'm going to get it in. So you can't let it drift for too long. But basically, I think you have to trust the academic community. It might be different in science. I don't know. So
you have this idea, you know, you've tested it either through looking at the literature or talking to people. How do you assess how feasible the idea is? How do you assess the idea is workable, the idea is worth pursuing? That's a really good question. I think my answer would be I tend to make it workable. So I have the idea, but then obviously if you look at the funding sources, if it was an idea where there was no possibility of getting any funding, then you'd have to drop that. But I can't really imagine that kind of idea. So I have the idea, and then I'd look at who would be the most suitable funders, what they're offering, how big the grant is, and then I would build my proposal around that. So it might be, for example, my postdoctoral project mainly funded me and some travel. That was pretty much it. And at the moment I'm just finishing a 5-year Wellcome Trust Strategic Award grant, which has had 4 PhD students and 3 postdocs on it. So you just kind of build it according to what's on offer, what the grant's for. Obviously you don't want to be trying to make a huge project out of something that could be done relatively simply, because any grant review panel would just look at that and say, well, the basic idea is good, but it could be done in 3 years by one person. Why has she got 5 postdocs working on it? So you have to think carefully about how you plan your projects. Let's look at the scenario. Where you have, let's say, you're lucky enough to have, let's say, 5 or 6 ideas. How do you prioritize? I tend not to have 5 or 6 good ideas, to be honest. I tend to kind of really know which is my key idea or my 2 key ideas. But basically, if I was in that position, I would really look at the funding streams, because that's really important. If you had a fantastic idea about a new methodology and the ESRC had a particular call out for funding new methods, then that's the one I'd probably go for. But it has to be, I suppose the key thing, it has to be the idea that really fires you and sparks you, because you're going to be spending an awful lot of time on this idea. It's quite nice if you can get a project that links in with other projects you've done, and I think that's probably what I've always done, not through thinking that through, but it's just happened like that. And I think that's good, because it means you don't have to go back to square one all the time. When you're writing a new proposal, you don't have to start looking at a new area of literature. You kind of know it, and you probably contributed to it. So I think those sorts of things are important, but definitely looking at the funding calls, thinking, perhaps go and talk to your research office, where would this idea fit? But mostly you have to do the groundwork and think where it fit best. Now to my final question. Given your experience of serving on a number of commission panels, when you're looking at an idea, what do you look for? What are the indicators of a good idea? Do you mean when we look at a proposal? Yeah. I've sat on, I suppose, 4 or 5 different ones now, but they all have a huge amount in common, and we're all looking for the same thing, although we come from different disciplines. So the key thing would be, is this a novel idea? Not completely, completely wacky, but is it novel? Is it going to contribute something to an area, an important area that we want to know more about? So the idea has to be there. Is it doable?
So has the person really got a good timeline, so you can see they've thought through all sorts of issues, they know what might delay the project, they've made contingency plans for that. Is it doable with the number of staff they've allocated to it? Then it would be the person. You'd look at the person's background. So if they're inexperienced, if they haven't really run many grants before, you'd look at that and you'd look at their track record very much. Have they written stuff? Have they, you know, they're active in the community? But you'd really look at, if it was a new researcher, you'd really look at who they've got around them, who their team is, whether that team will support that new researcher or that relatively inexperienced researcher. What's the university like? You know, that's really important. Where do you know, what support does the university offer you? But it's basically, it is pretty much that. Value for money comes into it, but it's really, is the idea a good one? Can this person do it? Do they understand what it takes to, you know, get the grant through, do the work? Because no panel wants to give you 300,000, $1 million to do work and then you don't pull it through. It doesn't come to fruition. So those are the key things, I think.
Okay.
Sometimes you have interviews and you have to really obviously think those through carefully, and again you should have mock interviews, you should get your university to organise mock interviews, all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's a tough world, but but it's fun.
Yeah. Hopefully, given the advice you've provided us today, early career researchers definitely fall on this and come out with very good ideas, which will lead to some very great proposals.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure.
For sharing your useful experience with us today, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.